What would you do if you had to meet your child's in-laws for the first time? I decided to play a little experiment. I pretended to be a naive, harmless mother. I thought it would make things easier, but what happened next completely shocked me and changed the way the whole family saw me. I never thought one dinner could change the way my family saw me. And the truth is, I didn't expect what happened next. It all started when my son asked me to meet his fiance's family. Normally, I'm not the kind of mother who overthinks these things, but something about this situation felt different. I'd met plenty of in-laws before, but there was something about this family that made me nervous, a feeling I couldn't quite shake. On the day of the meeting, I dressed in something comfortable but presentable. Nothing too flashy, nothing that screamed "look at me," just warm and approachable. I even practiced my tone in the mirror, soft, polite, and endlessly agreeable. I smiled at my reflection, reassuring myself, "You've got this." The moment we arrived, I immediately noticed the energy in their house. It was a large, elegant home with an air of sophistication. I could tell they took pride in appearances. Everything meticulously arranged, from the polished dining table to the perfectly placed decorations. I knew I needed to tread carefully. First impressions matter more than we often admit. My son led the way, introducing me to his fiance's parents. They were friendly, but there was an undertone of scrutiny, a subtle testing of boundaries. I could feel their eyes assessing me, measuring, judging, trying to figure out what kind of mother I was. And that's when I leaned into my plan. I smiled, tilted my head slightly, and let my naive mother persona shine. I asked innocent questions about their home, about their hobbies, even about their choice of curtains. Everything I said carried this gentle, almost childlike curiosity. At first, it seemed to work. The tension eased, and they responded warmly. I laughed lightly at their jokes, nodded enthusiastically at their stories, and maintained this air of harmless charm. I even complimented the food before taking a bite, a little ritual to show gratitude without giving any room for criticism. For a while, it felt like I'd successfully disarmed them. But then, something unexpected happened. As the evening went on, I noticed small comments, little jabs, almost hidden beneath polite conversation, questions about my son's upbringing, subtle hints that they didn't entirely approve of me or the way I raised him. My first instinct was to react defensively, to argue or justify myself. But I reminded myself of the persona I'd adopted. I stayed soft, stayed naive, and continued nodding as if I were absorbing their wisdom. To my surprise, this approach had an effect I hadn't anticipated. The more naive I appeared, the more they seemed to let their guard down. They began sharing stories from their own lives, moments of vulnerability and embarrassment. I listened intently, showing interest and empathy, all while keeping my persona consistent. They didn't realize it, but by pretending to be less threatening, I was actually gaining insight into their personalities and family dynamics. At one point, Mrs. Thompson, the mother-in-law-to-be, asked me how I managed my home, implying that perhaps I was too casual or unorganized. I smiled gently and said something along the lines of, "Oh, I'm always learning. My son keeps me on my toes, and there's always something new to figure out." It was vague, harmless, and it made her laugh. Instead of criticism, I had turned it into a moment of connection. Then came the turning point. During dessert, a topic about family traditions arose. They asked about holidays, about celebrations, and about how we handled disagreements. I shared small, innocent anecdotes, the kind that seemed trivial but revealed thoughtfulness. I was careful to make them sound sweet and naive, but not foolish. And that's when I noticed a shift. Their demeanor changed subtly. The scrutiny softened, replaced with curiosity and eventually warmth. By the end of the night, something remarkable had happened. What started as a cautious, tense dinner had transformed into a lively conversation where everyone was laughing, sharing, and genuinely enjoying the company. They complimented me, praised my son for being so well-mannered, and even admitted that they were impressed with how easygoing I was. I smiled to myself, knowing that none of it had been about actual naivete. It was about strategy, about showing humility and approachability. But the real surprise came after we left. My son pulled me aside and whispered, "Mom, I don't know how you did it, but they really like you." I laughed softly, feeling a mix of relief and pride. I hadn't just pretended to be naive for amusement. I had built a bridge between two families that could have easily clashed. Over the next few weeks, the effect lingered. My daughter-in-law's family began inviting me to more gatherings, more casual meetups, and even small celebrations. Each time, I maintained that balance, warm, gentle, and slightly naive, which made them comfortable and more open. It was almost like I had cracked a code. The secret wasn't about being less intelligent or less capable. It was about disarming potential judgment and creating a safe, friendly environment. Looking back, I realize there's a larger lesson here, one that goes beyond family dynamics. Sometimes, the power of perception is greater than the reality of who we are. By choosing how others see us, by emphasizing humility, approachability, and patience, we can create opportunities for connection and understanding. Pretending to be naive wasn't about deception, it was about communication, about crafting a narrative that encouraged trust rather than conflict. I have also learned something about the dynamics of in-law relationships. There's often an unspoken tension, a fear of judgment, and a need to test boundaries. And rather than meeting that tension with defensiveness or pride, I discovered that patience, empathy, and strategic humility can transform the relationship entirely. It's not about being fake, it's about being mindful of how your actions are received and adjusting in a way that promotes harmony. Since that night, I've shared this story with friends, and almost everyone laughs at my naive mother persona. But the laughter masks the deeper truth. It worked because it was intentional, thoughtful, and empathetic. I didn't manipulate anyone. I simply presented myself in a way that encouraged openness, and in return, I received warmth and acceptance. Even now, months later, my relationship with my daughter-in-law's family continues to grow stronger. We share dinners, holidays, and casual conversations without tension or unease. I've seen firsthand that the first impression doesn't have to define the long-term relationship. It's how you manage the interactions afterward, how you maintain consistency in kindness and approachability that shapes the outcome. And here's the part I want to leave you with. Sometimes, pretending, not in a deceitful way, but in a thoughtful, strategic way, can lead to surprising outcomes. By choosing to appear less threatening, more naive, or more approachable, you can create bridges in relationships that otherwise might remain tense or distant. It's not about dishonesty. It's about empathy, patience, and a willingness to see the world through someone else's eyes, even if just for a night. That dinner taught me more than I could have imagined. It taught me about family dynamics, the subtle power of perception, and the importance of strategic humility. And most importantly, it reminded me that sometimes the best way to navigate tricky social situations is to step back, soften your approach, and let warmth and curiosity lead the way. So, if you're ever in a situation where you're meeting your child's partner's family or entering any environment that feels intimidating, remember this story. Consider the power of approachability, the value of patience, and the surprising effects of a little intentional naivety. You don't have to change who you are. Just present yourself in a way that invites connection rather than conflict. Because sometimes the simplest strategies yield the most remarkable results.